Good day everyone, it is Caitlin, and today I will be teaching you ways to keep cool in 19th century clothing even when it is ridiculously hot. Let's begin with getting dressed. Even though it is nearly 90 degrees Fahrenheit when I was beginning to dress this day and ended up just over 100 degrees, I will be wearing the same layers as I typically do. The layers serve a purpose, and just because it is warm, not many of them may be dispensed with. So we are beginning with stockings. I chose brown cotton today. I knew I would be outside quite a bit, and brown hides the dirt, and cotton is the coolest option among the silk, wool, and cotton accent stockings that we see. Getting them over a sweaty leg can be a bit more difficult than usual, but I managed. Next, I will put on an elastic garter to help keep up the stockings, and now to repeat with the other side. Now, when it is extremely hot, garters, stockings, and shoes may be dispensed with, and one may go barefoot, but I'm in an environment today where there may be broken pottery around and rusty nails sticking up out of some of the floorboards, so me wearing footwear today is more about safety than actually keeping cool. Later, I will show some footage of me doing work with no footwear and my skirts pinned up, which is a wonderful way of keeping cool. Of course, after stockings and garters come shoes. These are from American Duchess, and today they are not wanting to slip on as easily as they typically do. I chose shoes today instead of boots, mostly because they are shorter and therefore cooler, but boots are more practical. Now it is time to get on with the actual dressing. I am taking off my wrapper, which is sort of a house coat, to reveal a chemise. I am already sweating, so I'm going to try to get some airflow underneath my chemise to cool myself down a bit before beginning with the other layers. Now, typically I would don drawers at this point, but it is hot enough I think I will leave that layer out. Some people prefer drawers when it's warm to prevent chafing, but I already despise drawers, so I am more than happy to leave them off for today. The next layer I will put on is my corset, used primarily for bust and back support. A corset is an essential layer in most 19th century women's clothing. This one hooks up the front with a metal bust and is supported with a modern synthetic whalebone substitute, since one cannot legally get the real deal. A lot of people believe that only women with maids could wear corsetry, but that's clearly not the case. I am fully able to lace myself and do that the vast majority of the time. In fact, I have a video on how to lace yourself into 4 different corsets of varying styles, and I will link that video above so that you may peruse that video after this one if you wish. After tying my laces in the front, I am ready for the next layer. But first I will tuck up my laces, that way as I walk I don't pull on them with my legs and therefore unlace my corset. But before getting into the next layer, it is quite warm in this room and I am on a farm with not a soul around, so I'm going to go stand in the dog trot for a moment to cool down. Dog trot houses are the most wonderful thing in the South, and I still cannot quite comprehend why we did away with the style, as the way the buildings are constructed catch the breeze and keep the place much cooler than the outside temperature. Alright, let's continue with the dressing. I'll put on a little base petticoat to be a dust-catching layer and to help keep my skirts off my legs. Another petticoat will complete my petticoat layers. I typically wear a corded petticoat between the 2 layers, and also a wool petticoat as the topmost petticoat, but I chose to dispense with the corded petticoat today, and although a smooth dress weight wool petticoat will not add to the heat factor, I was not doing hard manual labor this day, so I felt as though I didn't need the wool layer. But I have on other occasions worn my working wool petty, working in a hot kitchen on a stove, even when it's well over 100 degrees Fahrenheit, so it doesn't cause an issue. After moving the buttons to the back, I am ready to put on my dress. I chose a cotton dress today for the cooling factor. This one is a lovely reproduction cotton paisley print. It closes up the front with hooks and eyes. This one is fully lined. If it was extremely hot, which I live in Texas, so over 100, isn't extremely hot. Once we start getting to the 110 degrees range, that's extremely hot. But I do have dresses that are either partially lined, meaning that perhaps the lining doesn't go all the way up to the neck. You can have what is called a half-high lining, which means that there's one less layer at your neckline, which actually does help keep one cool. I also own dresses that are based off extant garments that are only lined just under the underarm, and that's just a sweat catching layer, so the sweat doesn't show through on the right side of the dress, but the rest of the bodice is unlined, and that is extremely cooling. This one just happens to be fully lined. Then there is a button and buttonhole on each cuff that needs to be fastened, and that is essentially dressed, although I did not put a collar on this gown, so I will be donning a neckerchief. Neckerchiefs are my favorite for warm days, and we will explore why in a moment. For now, it is merely a diamond-shaped piece of fabric. This one happens to be linen, which is cooler than cotton, folded in half and then placed and tucked inside the neckline of the dress. This provides a layer of sweat protection for the gown. The sweat from my neck will catch on the more easily washable neckerchief than my dress, which keeps my dress cleaner longer, which in turn means I do not have to wash the dress as often, meaning that the life of the dress is therefore extended. And that is it for getting dressed in hot weather. Not very much different than my usual layers of clothing. Now for the issue of keeping cool while still keeping up with my daily household chores. I have some butter to churn and some light sewing to do. The coolest place in the house is the center front porch where the dog trot tees off with the porch. I shall grab a chair from the kitchen and place it in the coolest spot in the house to do whatever chores I may in that exact spot. I paused here for a moment because the breeze felt so wonderful and I opted not to move for a few seconds. My first chore is to fetch water. Drinking water when it is hot, extremely important. And we also use our water for other things around the house, chores and whatnot. You'll notice I'm wearing a sunbonnet for this, which provides sun protection as well as personal shade from the sun's glare. I do not often bother tying my sunbonnets when it's not particularly windy to keep the ties from around my neck, and also because I'm lazy. Now that I am back on the porch, I may take off the bonnet. Slat bonnets are particularly wonderful as the wooden slat pieces inside the bonnet keep the brim stiff enough that the bonnet may be folded and used as a fan when needed. And now for the best way of keeping cool, and for this we require our neckerchief. Taking your neckerchief, dipping it in water, wringing it out, and putting it back on is the best sort of 19th century air conditioning there is. The wet layer against your skin feels heavenly, and when it dries out, all one has to do is take it back off and dip it in water again. I find that my neckerchief, even on very hot days, will stay cool and wet for an hour or two between dippings, although if it's exceptionally hot, I will dip it more often to get the cool water next to my skin. My gown does go all the way to the neck, so I am undoing the first few hooks and then folding the neckline back slightly to create a V shape to the neck, which will allow more air to get through. Now I am churning butter on the porch. When in the shade, one may push up the sleeves of one's dress, although you do not want to do this if you are cooking around a fire or out in the sun. Sleeves provide a layer of protection from the flying embers when cooking and a layer of sunscreen, basically, when not in the shade, so keeping your sleeves long and down is advisable in such situations for safety. If not cooking, nor in the sun, rolling up sleeves allows for more air to get to the skin and does keep the body cooler than having the sleeves against the skin. And sometimes after cleaning out a hot kitchen, it's lovely simply to find a shaded place in the yard to enjoy the breeze and perhaps take a quick nap. I have been known to pull up my skirts to allow more airflow underneath as well. Another way of keeping cool is to honestly dump a pitcher of water on your head, or if you're wearing a cap, to dip it in much the same way as we did the neckerchief. But I am not wearing a cap, so a pitcher of water on my hair it is. Do make sure you are fully hydrated before doing this because you will need that water to stay hydrated as well. And when it's supremely hot, sometimes there's not much else to do but to take a short hike to the creek down from the house, once all your chores are done, of course. Strip down to your chemise and go sit in the water. Getting the clothes off could be a bit difficult as the sweat has caused them to stick to my skin, but off they go. And clearly I have holes in my chemise which need mending. There are others underneath the arms, so the chemise is currently in my mending pile. When highly motivated, it does not take long to undress, even with all the layers. And the corset is last to be removed, and then I can go into the water. Although really, just being in my chemise is far cooler than having the other layers on. Although a chemise does not provide much sun protection, so it is better to wear all the layers than not for sun safety. Now to figure out how to get into the creek with a 3-foot muddy drop-off bank and a very slippery moss in the creek itself. Jumping in is not advisable. See how I slipped slightly? But oh my goodness, does that ever feel wonderful. Once I'm done, I will need to get my clothes back on with a lovely wet chemise, and then resume my duties on the farm. If I was doing hard labor like I was this particular day, working in the garden, taking off stockings, garters, shoes, and then pinning up my skirts and my apron both keeps my clothes clean, and it also aids in the cooling factor, which is wonderful. Thank you for joining me today as we learn some of the ways to keep cool in all the layers of 19th century clothing. If you enjoyed the video, please like it and subscribe to the channel. We focus a lot on mid-19th century clothing and general life here. If you have other ways that you've managed to keep cool in your 19th century clothing, or if you've learned something new from the video, please share it in the comments below. I love chatting with my viewers. As always, have a fantastic week, and I will see you back here on Monday.